Good morning, welcome to Breakfast with Dan Walker and Sally Nugent.
Headlines for you at 6 o'clock this morning. The Prime Minister warns that time is running out to prevent catastrophic global warming as world leaders arrive in Glasgow for the COP26 Climate Change Summit.
It's a 1 minute to midnight moment and the clock is ticking. We have to get everybody to do more.
And good morning from Glasgow as 12 days of talks on the future of the planet get underway. We'll look at how climate change is damaging lives here and around the world and ask what can we do to cut our emissions with 120 leaders from around the world here. Now, can they really reach a deal?
17 people are taken to hospital after two trains collide in Wiltshire. We will be live there this morning, close to the scene of the crash.
A night to remember for best friends Freddie and Huey, their fundraising effort to win them a Pride of Britain award, and a red carpet encounter with none other than Hollywood A-lister Sharon Stone.
You know, you don't have to have a lot of good friends, but you have to have one.
Yeah.
He's your one, isn't he?
He's
and
mine.
He's your one, isn't he? He'd do anything for you too, right?
Yeah.
That's the way it goes.
Good morning in sport. Chelsea get the Women's FA Cup final they wanted. They'll play Arsenal after the Gunners beat Brighton as Chelsea knock out the defending champions, Manchester City.
Good morning. We're looking at some sunshine and blustery showers this week. It will be cool by day. There'll be some frost by night. There's something quieter coming our way midweek. I'll have all the details later in the programme.
It is Monday, the 1st of November. Our main story this morning is the start of the COP26 International Climate Change Conference in Glasgow.
World leaders are facing calls for urgent action to tackle global warming. Nina is there for us this morning and can bring us more. Morning, Nina.
Good morning, Dan and Sally. Yeah, it's one of those moments, is it? All eyes of the world will be on Scotland today as world leaders gather here in Glasgow for the COP26 summit. Now, the aim of this two-week event is to commit to measures to limit the rise in global temperatures and cut emissions. Now, in his speech, Prime Minister Boris Johnson will tell them that the clock is ticking and that we must act today or it will be too late for the next generation. But as our political correspondent Chris Mason explains, there is mounting pressure for action, not just words.
The world arrives in Glasgow today, or at least lots of its leaders do, with plenty saying now is the time, there has to be action, and plenty of it, to minimise the impacts of climate change.
Well, this is very, very urgent for not just for our country, for the whole world. And if I had to give a comparison, I'd say it was a 1 minute to midnight moment, and the clock is ticking. We have to get everybody to do more, and they need to make further commitments. They need to make further commitments on how we're going to move away from coal, from fossil fuel burning, how we're going to move away from using hydrocarbon cars, how we're going to plant millions of trees, if not 1 trillion trees around the world, protect the world's biodiversity, and above all, how we're going to get the whole of the developing world to buy into this.
So what is COP26? COP stands for Conference of the Parties and was set up by the United Nations to try to tackle climate change. The first one, COP1, took place in 1995. This is the 26th. Nearly 200 countries are being asked to submit plans to cut their emissions, and around 25,000 delegates are expected to turn up in Glasgow. You know, the Prime Minister's been sounding pretty gloomy about the prospect of getting a meaningful agreement from this summit. Are rich countries willing to do enough themselves, and are they willing to help poorer countries tackle climate change? Boris Johnson and the Prince of Wales will welcome world leaders to Glasgow later, with Prince Charles saying this is the last chance saloon. The soundbite we'll regularly hear is trying to keep 1.5 alive, keeping global average temperatures no more than 1.5 degrees warmer than pre-industrial times to avoid the worst impacts of climate change. It's widely accepted achieving that will be very difficult. Some think it's already too late. Chris Mason, BBC News.
Well, our chief political correspondent, Adam Fleming, is also here in Glasgow. Morning, Adam. The Prime Minister there talking about actions, not words. As the host nation, the UK and Scotland, will there be pressure to lead from the front? Can we expect any new announcements?
Of course there'll be pressure, because countries that host these climate conferences end up having a reputation after them. So, for example, Denmark did one a few years ago that went quite badly, whereas France did one that went really well. So of course there is pressure, but also, as I've been learning about this process, it's not like your normal summit where it's all on the hosts. Actually, it is all on the 197 countries and organisations that are here doing these negotiations. So it's not as simple as it's Britain's fault if it goes badly, or Britain's responsibility if it goes well. What really struck me over the last few days is how gloomy the Prime Minister has been sounding. He is normally a pretty upbeat kind of guy. He sounds a little bit miserable about all of this. And I think that is because, so far, countries have not made commitments to cut their carbon emissions by enough to hit that crucial target of limiting the increase in global temperatures to 1.5 degrees by the middle of the century. Now, that could change starting today, because we're going to have more than 100 prime ministers and presidents and world leaders here. And the point of these COP conferences is that it's not just the rich, powerful countries that produce lots of emissions. You also get poorer countries who are already starting to feel the effects of climate change, and some developing countries who are starting to emit quite a lot of carbon themselves as they grow. And I'm told that can be quite a combustible mix that can either lead to a bust-up or a big breakthrough. Also, over the next couple of days, the UK's already pre-agreed some side agreements to come out of the conversations, so it already looks like things are going quite well. And just to give you a sense of how big it is, Nina, even though you and I are at the same event, it would take me about 25 minutes to walk to where you are. That's how big it is.
So you're not just being lazy and saying you won't come over, Adam? Is that what you're saying?
No, any time. It'll just take me a little while to get there.
You won't be back in time for your next hit. Thank you, Adam Fleming. And that's it, Dan and Sally. We've got around 120 world leaders here. They're all coming at it from their own perspective, different priorities, different targets. It's whether they can all come together to reach an agreement. Lots of scepticism about whether anything tangible will be reached, but not trying is just not an option.
Nina, thanks very much indeed. We will be back with you very shortly.
Let's bring you some other news this morning. Rail accident investigators are examining the scene of a collision between two trains in Salisbury, which left 17 people needing hospital treatment.
Officials say the line could be closed for some time while inquiries continue, as John Kay reports.
1 mile from the centre of Salisbury. It was here just before 7 o'clock last night that a Great Western Railways train hit an object inside the Fisherton Tunnel. It's believed part of the train derailed, knocking out the signalling. A few minutes later, a South Western train travelling from London to Devon collided with the first.
This is a massive impact, and I fell across the table, and then the table came off the wall, ended up underneath another table.
It was just suddenly a lot of jostling, possessions being thrown around. I think a few people went forward and hit their heads.
Firefighters have carried out a thorough search of the train carriages, and we've assisted with the evacuation of approximately 100 people. We do not believe there are any further casualties on board the train, and we can confirm that there are no fatalities.
The more seriously injured passengers were taken to nearby hospitals, as well as one of the drivers who had to be freed from their train. The walking wounded were treated at a church close to the crash site.
I could tell that some people were a little bit shaken, and some obviously had some minor injuries, and I think probably they just appreciated a space to be able to pause really and to reflect on what happened to them.
After the initial emergency response, things will now move to the investigation phase. The question, what caused this sequence of events? What caused these trains to collide? And how will they be removed from the tunnel?
One possibility is that heavy rain might have caused some kind of slippage onto the track. Serious questions remain, but the overriding sense here is relief. This could have been much, much worse. John Kay, BBC News, Salisbury.
Well, let's speak to our reporter Andrew Plant, who is near the scene of that collision for us this morning. Andrew, good to have you on the programme. Hopefully you can bring us the very latest. I imagine the investigation continues.
Morning, Dan. Yeah, lots of people here in Salisbury still out trick-or-treating last night when they heard what they described as a massive bang. It was only about 7:15 in the evening, and the cause of that bang is still visible, of course. The trains they left off last night. I'll step out the way so you can zoom in and see. Now, in terms of what we know, you just heard there in John's report that one of those trains travelling, we think, from Portsmouth up towards Bristol, when something caused it to derail. It hit something, we still don't know what, but it took out some of the signalling around it at that point, and then roughly 6 or 7 minutes later, another train which was travelling from London to Honiton in Devon collided with that train. Passengers on board describing the bang, the shaking, waiting in the dark for the emergency services to arrive. We know about 100 people were evacuated, and as of this morning, we think 17 people still in hospital. One of those people, the driver of one of those trains. But as you say, today it is all about the investigation. What was it that caused that train to derail in the first place? Was it the weather, a tree, a landslide, or something else? We still don't know, but we hope at some point today that investigation will give us a bit more information about exactly what happened here last night.
Andrew, thank you very much for that.
See the headlines as they happen and watch BBC News live in the app and get the full story with bbc.co.uk/news. Follow the story for all the latest with BBC News.